Why New York is Dying begins with the financial collapse of Manhattan, where the heart of global finance is bursting at the seams with accumulated problems that became apparent by 2026. Manhattan has always been a symbol of wealth and power, the center of Wall Street, where billions of dollars flow daily through banks, hedge funds, and investment firms. But now this machine is faltering. The city's budget deficit has reached astronomical proportions, with a shortfall of $2.2 billion in the current fiscal year and $10.4 billion next year, the largest gap since the Great Recession. These figures are not just statistics. They reflect a systemic failure of financial management, with previous administrations relying on ad hoc measures like prepaying expenses and underestimating ongoing costs for overtime, homeless shelters, rental assistance, and legal fees for education. As a result, the city finds itself in a trap where tax revenues fail to keep pace with spending, despite the nationwide economic growth. Manhattan is suffering particularly hard because its economy is tied to finance and insurance, where high wages generated the lion's share of tax revenue, but the sector is now losing ground. Finance and insurance lost 8,400 jobs at the beginning of the year, professional services 8,000, and corporate management 1,000, while new jobs are being created in low-wage sectors like healthcare and transportation. This leads to an erosion of the tax base, with the wealthy paying less and the city forced to raise taxes on those who remain, accelerating the outflow of people and businesses. Manhattan's office market, once robust, is now showing signs of decline, though not as catastrophic as in other cities. Office space availability in the central business districts fell to 15.6% by the end of 2025, better than the national average of 20%, but still far from pre-pandemic levels below 8%. Remote work, which has taken hold since the pandemic, continues to weigh on demand, particularly in Class B and C buildings, where vacancy rates exceed 20% and rents are falling to $30 to $60 per square foot, compared to $160 per square foot in premium properties. Trophy buildings are holding up better, with occupancy rates above 90%. But even there, rent growth has slowed, and office sales, although up to $5 billion, don't offset the overall losses in property values. Manhattan's financial collapse is exacerbated by external factors, such as the federal government's tariff policy, which has created market uncertainty and slowed mergers and acquisitions, where Wall Street traditionally reaps hefty commissions. Banks and funds are laying off staff as globalization retreats, while local economies in Texas and Florida attract companies with low taxes and a lack of regulatory pressure. New York State has led the state in net population loss for several years now, losing 21,269 residents since 2020. Manhattan is feeling the impact the most, as the middle class and young professionals leave in search of affordable housing and a better quality of life. Homelessness remains a chronic problem, with over 100,000 people in shelters each night and hundreds of thousands temporarily doubling up in other people's homes, creating an additional budget burden of hundreds of millions of dollars annually. While crime has fallen to historic lows in murders and shootings, the visible disorder of homeless and mentally ill people on the streets undermines the perception of safety, deterring tourists and investors. As a result, Manhattan, which once attracted talent and capital from around the world, is now losing its magical aura, turning into an expensive but troubled borough, where the glitz of skyscrapers conceals a deep financial and social crisis. City officials are trying to plug the holes with $1.5 billion in state aid. But this is only a temporary measure and doesn't address the root causes, such as excessive spending and a loss of competitiveness compared to other regions. If this trend continues, Manhattan risks entering a downward spiral where empty offices will lead to falling taxes, service cuts, and further outflow of residents, making financial ruin not just a headline, but a reality of everyday life in what was once the world's greatest city. Manhattan's financial collapse continues with a sharp decline in commercial real estate revenue, which for decades has been New York City's primary tax source. Office buildings in downtown Manhattan, particularly in Midtown and the financial district, have lost significant value since the pandemic, as remote work became the norm for hundreds of thousands of employees at banks, law firms, and consulting firms. By 2026, the average occupancy rate for Class A offices was around 85%, but for Class B and C offices, it barely reached 60%, leading to rents falling 30 to 40% from their 2019 peak. Many building owners are unable to service mortgages taken out at high pre-pandemic valuations, leading to rising defaults and forced sales at fire sale prices. In 2025, office sales in Manhattan fell 50% compared to the previous year, and the average price per square foot dropped from $2,000 to $1,300 in most transactions. This creates a cascading effect. When property values fall, property taxes, which make up about 30% of the city budget, generate less revenue, forcing the mayor's office to either raise rates or cut spending on police, firefighters, schools, and street cleaning. Higher taxes discourage remaining renters and residents, accelerating capital flight to states without income taxes, such as Florida and Texas, where many financial companies have already moved a significant portion of their operations. Over the past 5 years, more than 150 major Wall Street firms have opened offices in Miami, Austin, and Nashville, taking with them thousands of highly paid professionals who previously paid hefty sums in state and city income taxes. The loss of these taxpayers is estimated at billions of dollars annually, and Manhattan, where the average salary in the financial sector exceeds $300,000 per year, is suffering the most. Another factor in the decline is the sharp decline in bonuses on Wall Street, which traditionally fueled retail, restaurants, and the luxury real estate market. In 2025, the total volume of bonuses in the securities industry fell by 25% compared to 2019 due to a weak IPO market, a decline in M&A activity, and tightened regulations following a series of scandals. Without these bonuses, which previously amounted to tens of billions of dollars annually, luxury retail on Fifth and Madison Avenues is seeing sales decline by 30 to 40%, with many boutiques closing and flagship stores moving online or to other cities. High-end restaurants in Manhattan, which relied on corporate lunches and dinners with clients, are losing revenue because employees are working remotely and missing the office 3 to 4 days a week. The average bill at Michelin-starred restaurants has fallen by 15%, and the number of restaurant bankruptcies has doubled over the past 2 years. Tourism, which partially offset the losses from the office sector, is also suffering. Although the number of visitors to New York City has approached pre-pandemic levels, average tourist spending per person has declined due to rising prices for hotels, restaurants, and transportation. Many are coming for 1 or 2 days instead of a week, choosing budget accommodations in Brooklyn or Queens rather than downtown Manhattan. This means that midtown hotels have occupancy rates of around 75%, with an average rate of $180 per night, compared to $250 pre-pandemic. Hotels are forced to offer discounts, free breakfasts, and waived resort fees, further reducing revenue and tax revenue from hotel taxes. Taken together, all these factors create a vicious cycle. Lower tax revenue leads to less money for infrastructure maintenance, leads to deteriorating quality of life, leads to further outflow of residents and businesses, leads to further decline in revenue. Manhattan, once the untouchable financial center of the world, now looks like a city losing its former glory. Empty floors in skyscrapers, shuttered stores, fewer street vendors, less energy on weekdays. Even iconic skyscrapers like One World Trade Center and the Empire State Building are struggling to fill their upper floors, which once housed prestigious offices. Financial collapse is no longer just a prediction. It's being felt in everyday life. Dirty streets, broken sidewalks, subway delays, and reduced police patrols in some areas. City officials talk about the need for drastic measures, from imposing new taxes on the wealthy to cutting municipal staff by 10 to 15%. But the political will to take such steps is lacking due to fear of losing their voices. The decline of Manhattan deepens due to the skyrocketing cost of living, which is driving out the middle class and young professionals, the very people who have long sustained the city's economy through their work and spending. By March 2026, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan has reached $4,800 per month, while two-bedroom units exceed $7,000, a 45% increase from 2019 levels. Buying property has become equally unattainable. The median condominium price in prime areas surpasses $2 million, and desirable co-ops start at $1,400,000. These figures remain out of reach for most workers, even those earning $150,000 annually after federal, state, and city taxes consume nearly half their income. As a result, birth rates in Manhattan have dropped to the lowest level in the past 50 years. Only one child per 1,000 residents aged 25 to 34, because families simply cannot afford to live and raise children here. Schools are losing students, and many private institutions are forced to cut tuition or close classes due to the exodus of families to suburbs or other states. Young adults aged 22 to 35, who once flocked to New York for career opportunities and urban energy, now choose more affordable major cities: Austin, Denver, Nashville, Raleigh, where comparable rent ranges from $1,800 to $2,500, and quality of life is higher thanks to lower density, cleaner air, and reduced stress. This demographic shift hits Manhattan's retail and service sectors hardest. Fewer young people mean fewer patrons for bars, clubs, gyms, coffee shops, and trendy stores. Neighborhoods once buzzing with life after dark, Lower East Side, Chelsea, now feel noticeably quieter on weekdays. Establishments targeting millennials and Gen Z are closing at alarming rates. New restaurant and bar openings have fallen 60% compared to pre-pandemic levels, while bankruptcies have tripled in the last 2 years. Another blow comes from the loss of the creative class. Designers, artists, musicians, and startup founders, who once made Manhattan a cultural capital, are leaving en masse because studios and lofts have become prohibitively expensive and grants and sponsorships have shrunk amid the broader economic slowdown. Broadway, the symbol of cultural grandeur, reports 20% lower attendance in the 2025 to 2026 season. Tickets sell poorly. Many shows close early, and tours are rerouted to cities with more solvent audiences. Museums and galleries suffer too. Visitation to the Metropolitan Museum and MoMA has dropped 15% as locals visit exhibitions less frequently and tourists opt for cheaper destinations. The financial collapse of Manhattan is visible in its infrastructure. The subway runs with frequent delays and cancellations. Repairs drag on due to budget shortages. Trains are skipped more often. Escalators break down. Platforms stay dirty. And cars contain noticeably more homeless individuals and people with mental health issues, deterring riders. Many have switched to taxis, Uber, or bikes, but even those options have become more expensive. An average Uber ride within Manhattan now costs $35 instead of $20. Roads and bridges are in poor condition. The iconic Brooklyn Bridge requires billions in urgent repairs, but the city budget cannot cover it without federal aid that has not materialized. All these factors combine into a vicious cycle. Lower tax revenue leads to less money for infrastructure maintenance, leads to declining quality of life, leads to accelerated exodus of residents and businesses, leads to further revenue loss. Manhattan, once the untouchable financial center of the world, now appears to be slowly crumbling. Its once shimmering streets are cracking, and its residents sense that the city's former glory is fading. The ultra-wealthy still cling to Upper East Side and Tribeca penthouses worth tens of millions. But even they complain about deteriorating services, rising petty crime, theft, graffiti, vandalism, and an overall feeling of decay. The middle class moves to Connecticut, New Jersey, or Long Island suburbs, where taxes are lower, schools are better, and homes are larger. In the end, Manhattan risks becoming a city of extremes. The super rich in skyscrapers with river views, and the extremely poor on the streets, with empty offices, shuttered shops, and silence where energy once roared. The financial collapse is no longer just budget numbers. It lives in the atmosphere, in people's moods, in the realization that New York is ceasing to be the place everyone dreams of moving to and staying forever. Manhattan's financial collapse reaches its peak through the accelerating exodus of corporations and the irreversible weakening of its status as the undisputed financial capital. By March 2026, major banks and hedge funds have cut Manhattan office space by 30 to 40% from pre-pandemic highs, shifting thousands of jobs to cheaper Sunbelt cities: Charlotte, Dallas, Miami, Tampa, Austin, where corporate taxes are lower or non-existent, and living costs allow firms to pay competitive salaries without breaking budgets. Hybrid work has become permanent. Most employees appear in the office only 1 or 2 days per week, slashing demand for premium office space. Class A vacancy hovers around 18%, while Class B and C buildings suffer 35 to 50% vacancy rates, with sublease space dumped at 60 to 70% discounts. Landmark towers stand half-empty. Prestige addresses lose their shine as tenants downsize or vanish entirely. When anchor tenants leave, ground-floor retail collapses. Restaurants, cafes, barbers, newsstands close within months. Midtown blocks that once commanded the world's highest street rents now display long rows of "for lease" signs and darkened storefronts. Luxury retail on 5th and Madison Avenues bleeds. Foot traffic down 40%. Many flagships shrink square footage, close upper levels, or exit Manhattan completely, redirecting capital to booming markets in Florida and Texas. The hollowing out is visible and palpable. Streets once jammed with executives and shoppers now feel subdued, even on weekdays. Municipal finances spiral deeper into crisis. Pension liabilities remain underfunded by over $100 billion. Required annual contributions devour larger chunks of the shrinking budget, while falling property assessments cut expected investment returns. Healthcare and retiree benefits add hundreds of millions in unavoidable pressure yearly. With revenue collapsing, discretionary spending vanishes. Parks go uncleaned, potholes stay unfilled, streetlights flicker longer before repair. Subway service deteriorates. More delays, dirtier cars, visibly higher presence of homeless and mentally ill riders. Police recruitment lags. Overtime is capped. Visible disorder grows. Open drug use, encampments, aggressive panhandling. Statistical crime drops do not offset the perception of insecurity that repels tourists, shoppers, and new residents. Manhattan's global brand erodes fast. Media and social platforms increasingly label it overpriced shadow of its former self, greedy and decaying, losing to cheaper, sunnier rivals. Viral videos of filth, delays, and street chaos amplify the narrative. Young talent, entrepreneurs, and executives skip New York altogether, choosing perceived vitality elsewhere. International capital flows elsewhere too. Sunbelt cities and overseas hubs now attract what once went to Manhattan skyscrapers. The vicious cycle locks in. Departures shrink taxes, services cut, quality of life worsens, more departures, deeper fiscal hole. No dramatic rescue appears on the horizon. No massive federal bailout, no sudden cost-slashing reform, no unexpected boom. Manhattan keeps its skyline, its icons, its history, but the economic pulse weakens, the human energy fades, and the once unstoppable city settles into prolonged, quiet decline. Still glittering on the surface, but increasingly empty underneath.